I don't even know where to start.
Yeah.
Welcome to 44 and 1. I'm GVizzle. This is Tempest. We're taking a bit of a break from our normal fun and frivolity to talk about some sad, sad news in the United States that affects neither of us, actually. You're in the UK and I'm a premenopausal woman in Canada, but it's still horrifying.
Yeah.
And that is the overturning of Roe v. Wade.
Future Tempest, aka Chris, just popping in to say that if you're watching this on YouTube, we'll be putting up images of all the things we're talking about to support what we're saying. I mean, if you're listening to it audio only, we'll provide a link to a list of all the references we include in this discussion, and we'll provide that in the YouTube description as well.
Which is everywhere.
And in a way, it does affect us, because what happens in Canada and the UK is often because of America. And we already have politicians here quite openly now talking against abortion. So
one of our, I think our health minister, when the conversation first started in the US, our health minister announced that they were going to actually allocate an additional $3.5 million towards abortion access and birth control access. And there are too many women in Canada who are farther than, I think it's 6 hours away from a safe abortion. So they want to shorten that time. So like Canada, very proudly, Canada, I mean, this is right now, we'll see what happens in the next several years. But as of right now, they are allocating even more resources and funds to broaden abortion access.
Yeah, that's not happening here.
Oh.
Yeah.
Honestly, every day there's a new reason for me to thank my parents for moving to Canada.
Yeah.
And another reason I'm glad I never had a child. I mean, I can't imagine like parents of young daughters right now.
Yeah. And what I find interesting is like, there'll be a lot of people out there saying, yeah, but neither of you have children, so how can you talk on this? And it's like, well, neither of us have children, so we are perfect to talk about it.
But anyone who I've never really agreed with that. If you don't have a uterus, you can't, because then that also eliminates all the male allies, right?
Yeah.
Right. Like, I think everybody is entitled to have an opinion. I don't think those opinions should form law when it doesn't. Yeah. I mean, like, I think we can all universally agree that murder is bad, and like there are things that are universally bad, but I don't ask people about their pap smears. I don't ask people the last time they had a prostate exam. Like it's just, that's a medical thing between me and my doctor. It's a right to medical care. It is just regular health care.
And I think the reason why you need voices from everybody is like, if it was only murderers talking about whether murder should be banned or not, and you only had people who were murdered talking about it, they can't, and murderers talking about it, then you know.
And it's, I mean, if the most solid base for something is a religious belief, then that shouldn't impact law. That shouldn't get to that point of law. And it's your personal opinion. If you don't want an abortion, don't have one. Yeah. That doesn't mean you get to take away just because you're lactose intolerant doesn't mean I can't eat ice cream, right? You don't get to take away my rights because they don't suit you. If you don't want it, don't have it. But then they always find out these hypocritical politicians who rally against abortion are sneaking their girlfriends across state lines to get one. So, I mean, it's just...
It's the hypocrisy.
It is. And it's just the lack of respect for... I mean, it's like... we're just reduced to a uterus at that point, right? And it's always comes down to, well, if you don't want it, don't have sex. But that's like blaming your oven when you fucked up a cake recipe, right? Like women are the ones getting pregnant. Men are the ones making women pregnant. So stop the seed, right? Enforce mandatory vasectomies, right? Like in lieu of like the Jewish tradition of a bar mitzvah, right? Instead of that, just globally at 13, it's like mass vasectomies. You can get it reversed later, and that way we stop the problem in its tracks.
When I was like 19, I asked my doctor if I could get a vasectomy. And he said, if you do, you have to pay for it private. We're not going to give you it as a young man. And I was like, but I know I don't want children. And then, so I said, it would just be better for me and less risky if I have a vasectomy now. And then he didn't even tell me about other contraceptives or anything. He just said, no, if you want it done privately, it's going to cost you however many hundreds of pounds, which obviously I'm not going to be able to pay for.
But you know what's interesting is that you were given that option, right? Like, as there are so many women who walk into their doctor's offices to say, I'd like to have a tubal ligation. And the doctor's like, well, what does your husband think? What if your future husband wants to have a baby? Like maybe you should come. Like some of them won't even do it unless the husband shows up to say like, yeah, we've decided this. So like you were given the option of paying for it private. Women are just told like, talk to your husband first.
Well, the private thing is a bit different to us because it's because like our system isn't catered for it kind of thing. It's just most things are available on the NHS. So I think it's more like just he took a different tack in it, because for us, if you say to us you've got to get it privately, that's the same as them saying no, fuck off. So yeah, it's it's a big deterrent. It's one of their soft nudges to get you to do what they want you to do.
But you could theoretically, if you were willing to money, you could have done it, no questions asked.
Probably. But that's like with anything, really. If you've got the money to do it, you can. But the people that like, because I mean, this is one of the problems they have in the States. Is like the morning after pill can be like $40 or $50, and they're saying, so they say like, oh, why don't you do X, Y, or Z? And you've got to give. If I do that, it's really expensive. So it's not a viable option to do it.
What it all comes down to is trying to punish women for having sex, not the men who get them pregnant. It's just we're reduced to the uterus, which is kind of like we were talking about the Giver last week. And the fourth book of the Giver, called Son, follows Gabriel's mother. And she, at the time of her, for anyone who doesn't know, in the Giver, when you turn 12, you are assigned your job. You don't choose your job, you are assigned your job. And the lowest of the low jobs is a birth mother. Yeah. So, and like, so the rules are you give birth 3 times and then you spend the rest of your life doing manual labor. And the births are in pretty quick succession. Like you give birth, you wait a few months, you give birth again. And then after your third birth, so in 3 years, presumably 3-4 years, you're done. And then you're 16 years old and working in a fish hatchery or doing other shit. But they call in the ceremony, when they assign the jobs, they call them birth mothers. But then when they're actually in it, they're just vessels. That's all they're called, is a vessel. Wow. And the child is a product. It's not a baby, it's a product. So she's a vessel. And she's delivering this product, and that's all she is. She's been reduced to being a vessel. And then she has to have, I'm going to ruin it for you. Spoiler alert. She has to have a C-section. And then they're like, no, she's a damaged vessel. We can't use her anymore. Off to the fish hatchery with her because she can't. Yeah. So like that, and that's kind of where we're at, right? Like women are we're just vessels to have these babies that no one seems to give a shit about. I mean, the only thing they care about is the uterus, because once the child is out, nobody cares.
Yeah.
Like what George Carlin said, if you're pre-born, you're fine. If you're pre-school, you're fucked. And that's exactly what it is.
They want live babies to make dead boys or something. They want live babies to make dead soldiers.
Or, hungry mouths that are desperate and will do whatever the government tells them to do, and they'll do all the jobs that no one else wants to do.
And I think there's a reason why birth rate falls as in groups where women have strong careers or they're educated to a certain level and stuff, and the birth rate drops. And if they do have children, they have children later. And I guess they just don't want that happening.
But then on the other side, right, then you always have the same people who believe that women shouldn't have access to, that there shouldn't be safe access to abortion, are the same ones that say that you're not a real woman if you've never had a baby. And that your life is unfulfilled, your life is inane and pointless, right? Like a woman could legit cure every single form of cancer out there, and people would be like, it's a shame she'll never know love though. And then her life was for naught because she didn't have a baby. Like it's been so force-fed from the time little girls can have their dolls. Their first doll is a baby, and they're being told right then and there, all you're going to be is a mom. Play house, play a ball, play little kitchens. Why are we asking 5-year-old girls, is that your baby, when they have dolls? Like we ingrain it in them. And then when they do get pregnant because we never told them how not to, now it's their fault.
Yeah, I mean, because you've got to educate children on all of the things that are going on. First of all, to protect the children so they know someone's messing with them. Because, I mean, like I didn't. So I didn't know someone was messing with me. So I didn't know it was wrong. And then people get away with shit. And maybe if because
children are taught to respect authority.
Yeah.
Right. And it's the authority figures that are usually the ones messing with them. So how do you teach that kid?
Yeah, exactly. Respect your elders. Maybe that's why I'm so like anti-authority and demand averse.
So you're talking about language of it, that now it used to be pro-life and pro-choice. Now it's pro-abortion and anti-abortion, but it's not pro-abortion. Like it really is just giving someone the right to choose, but give them the knowledge and the access to make that decision for themselves. Because it's like people will get so angry when you try to give somebody else parenting advice, but then they will tell you that force you to have a child that you don't want.
Yeah.
Argument number one, a woman has the right to choose. Answer, no, nobody has a universal right to choose. We all agree that some choices must be prohibited. The question is not if women should be able to choose generally, but if they should be able to choose to intentionally destroy innocent human life. If you say they do, then you have to defend that choice on its merits. You can't defend the choice based simply on the fact that it is one. Pro-lifers want to control women's bodies. Answer, no, the body in dispute is not the mother's. The question again is whether the body of the human in her womb can be intentionally destroyed. The child's body is the one at issue here, and we as pro-lifers are the ones trying to defend it. 3, pro-lifers are only pro-birth. They don't care about babies after they're born. Answer, you have no data or evidence to support that stupid claim. Besides, our position is that babies in the womb have moral worth equal to babies outside. Of course we believe babies outside have worth. That's the whole basis of our argument. Our assertion is that babies in the womb have worth, and that's based on our contention that babies and all people outside have worth. Our argument hinges on the comparison between humans inside and outside the womb.
Okay, so back to argument number one, a woman has a right to choose. And he's saying, no, women shouldn't have the right to choose. Some choices should be prohibited. What choices have ever been taken away from men in that instance, right? Like why is it always the woman who has to give up her choice and the woman who has to be monitored and...
Yeah, I think, well, things men have had a lot of choices taken away from us over the years in lots of different areas. It's just that this one is very clearly authoritarian tyrants that want to tell women how to live their life.
But it's also more than just this, right? Like it even starts when we're children, where girls have more restrictive dress codes than boys because, right, like they can't, no spaghetti straps, no short shorts. But then at the same time, the only clothes you can get for a girl are hypersexualized clothes that then she can't wear to school because then she's tempting the boys. So it's always about, instead of teaching one group self-control and respect, it's restricting the other group so that they don't tempt.
On that vein, I'm not sure though, because I mean, you do have a point with the clothes, but then that changes in adulthood. Like women have a much more variety to wear to work than men do. We get a shirt, a tie and trousers and a jacket, and we're not allowed to wear anything else. Like,
yes, but then still somewhat, I mean, it depends where you work, but like I've still been in like business casual environments where women are still monitored on, like you still wear strapless, strap tops. So it's still that in later life. The rules change, but they're still there.
I think what it is for me that stands out really is rather than the actual individual rules themselves or the amount of restrictions, I think both genders have them. It's just that the ones about women are about certain very specific things. Like it's about sexualization, it's about temptation and lewdness and all those things.
Yeah, whereas like I've worked in places where men have dress codes, but it's more about like logos on the shirt and wearing, so it's a bit broader, and then a lot of women have to follow those same logo type of rules, but then on top of that, skirts
don't wear anything too short.
Skirts need to be a certain length, or no sleeveless or whatever.
No cleavage.
So he says intentionally destroy innocent human life, which I think that comes back to the argument about when does life start, because if everyone says that life starts at conception, well then should men have to be paying child support for from the moment of conception, right? Like no, they don't. So then like you can't fight that argument. And the uterus itself, 50 to 75%, we talked about this before we were recording, 50 to 75% of pregnancies end in like a spontaneous miscarriage where no one even knew they were pregnant. They were just like, oh, my period is a few days late, and that was it. So like the uterus is the most efficient and effective abortionist out there. If my body itself will do it.
And they don't even know all of the reasons why it does it either. Sometimes it's because a specific gene isn't switched on, and then it'll just self-abort. Another one could be like if the woman's going through a lot of stress psychologically or physically, and then the fetus just won't take. And so they don't even know all the reasons.
A friend of mine had several miscarriages in a row, and then she was diagnosed with hypothyroidism, and that was like her body was attacking the fetus, thinking it was like a foreign substance. Like there's a ton of reasons why that, and like this whole innocent human life, it's a parasite at this point, right? Like,
exactly. It is, because to me, it's like we know when it's definitely alive, and we know when it's definitely a parasite. What the argument should be about is at which bit in the middle does it go from one to the other as a transitionary phase.
And I think that always, I mean, as far as I know, like in Canada, we've always had that because there's a strict end date as to when you can get an abortion, right? I think it's at the 5-month mark, because that's when it becomes, a more viable, and like, premature babies can still survive and thrive at that point. So there is that time limit. I mean, he's the same person who was saying about like post-birth abortions, which is infanticide. Like that.
Yeah. Nobody actually wants that.
No. And so like, I think they're so, and the myths, like so many people are like, well, just, people are just using abortion as birth control. It's like, no, that's not actually the case, because it's expensive. First of all, like no one's going to be, I don't know, like $500-700. No one just has that to throw around because they had unprotected sex one night. It's stressful on the body. It's stressful emotionally. I mean, because you're hoping not to get caught. Where do you find this place to go? Like that they assume women do it so flippantly is, again, it speaks to the value that they attribute to us as a gender in this species.
Because there will be some women out there that do use it as a form of birth control. But I think, like, from what you know of people and everything I've learned in psychology, it's going to be a small group. It's going to be a very few women.
A very small margin of women have that. There was
some, I know where they get the idea from, because there was some disgusting videos on TikTok. It's this horrible trend where these young girls, they're going to have their abortion, and they do like all these cutesy videos, like sitting on the bed and everything in their gowns and stuff. And it's vomit inducing. But like, how many of those people are doing it compared to how many women are on TikTok?
And it's not like they just did it for the TikTok, right? Like it's, maybe that's their way of coping with it, of trying to find.
We don't know them, so.
Exactly, we don't know anything about them. Like I'm the first person to crack a joke at a funeral. It's not that I'm taking the death and not seriously. That humor is my way of coping with things. Like maybe that's their way of coping, or reaching out to a group for support. We have no idea what their thought process is. But I mean, like I've known people who've had abortions, and it wasn't like, oh, oopsies.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I mean, it was not a difficult decision to make, because we haven't vilified it as much as maybe the US has, but it still wasn't easy, right? It wasn't easy on them mentally, emotionally, physically. It was still a difficult decision.
What they're classing as an abortion compared to us, I think, is different as well. So like, if I think of an abortion, I think of an invasive procedure where you're scraping it out, and it's like, that's quite tough for somebody to go through. And where they say that they use abortion as a form of contraception, I honestly think they think the morning after pill is an abortion.
They do, because they're trying to ban that and an IUD, because there's something about the way that the IUD works, that like it's implanted, but then it doesn't, like, I don't know the specifics about IUDs, but there's also conversation about banning IUDs. So now, like, it really is just about women shouldn't have sex.
It is, isn't it?
Punishing women for having sex, because it's like, no one's talking about like where the men are in this equation, right? No one's talking about, and even trying to ban ectopic pregnancy or miscarriages in those instances, rape and incest, like all of those are still kind of like, well, I mean, I'm not saying you were asking for it, but you were asking for it. Yeah. And even though there are a ton of people who have said like, how was I at 7 years old wearing like Oshkosh Bagosh asking for it in overall, right? Like, it's okay. Let's get back to his second point, because that was his second point, right?
Oh, I think so.
His third one is the most rage-inducing for me.
Like,
there's zero facts about the woman.
The people who tend to be anti-abortion tend to be the people who don't want a welfare state, and they don't want government intervention, and they don't want to have that welfare crutch to save people if they fall down. And then so they literally don't care about the lives of the children that they're forcing into the world.
No, they absolutely don't. And then that's his third point. That was one.
Can be intentionally destroyed. The child's body is the one at issue here, and we as pro-lifers are the ones trying to defend it. 3.
We're the ones trying to defend it, but you don't care about we're trying to defend the life, but then it has been proven that with the overturning of Roe v. Wade, all the studies have indicated that maternal death rates will increase by 21%, especially among Black women. That pregnancy and giving birth is the third leading cause of death among women in the United States. That time and time again, abortion legalization has reduced the number of unwanted children, has reduced the number of child abuse cases and child neglect, has reduced the number of children who live in poverty, improved long run outcomes for the women who are able to have that option. Forcing them to have a baby reduces their ability to contribute to the workforce, reduces their ability to have any sort of earning or life for themselves, but that doesn't It doesn't matter. Quality of life doesn't matter as long as they're alive.
And what I find really crazy is like how these are the same people as well that will fight tooth and nail for the Second Amendment, which I support the Second Amendment personally, but I don't support the gun culture that they have. It's very different, right? It's like, you know, you have less gun crime in Canada. And then they say like, oh, well, you know, if you introduce gun legislation, that's not going to reduce gun crime because criminals commit crimes, which is true. So they're going, okay, but let's ban abortion. Hang on. You want to stop abortion and you don't see the hypocrisy with the gun laws stuff that you say. Like,
no, it creates a thriving and dangerous back alley abortion business.
Exactly.
Which is going to lead to more young women dying because then when they have complications from those, they're not going to be able to go to an actual hospital to get the care that they need for that. So they're just going to have these infections that run rampant, or they're going to just die in the back alley van.
And the mental health cost in society is going to skyrocket because one of the biggest contributors, in just my personal opinion, to bad mental health, most of it can be fixed from a better, more supportive environment. Most of our mental health will go away if we destigmatize things and make things less taboo. Then people won't feel so fucked up. Like I was going to say about my friend, she's from Greece. So in Greece, in her era, it was like really frowned upon in the 70s and 80s, like when she was growing up, that you can't, you know, abortions are really bad stuff because of like the religion in the country. She went on a student exchange program and she went to Texas, and she started seeing a young lad over there when she was there. She got pregnant, and then she had to go to an abortion facility in Texas. I think this was in the 90s. And she said she had to, like, being on her own in a foreign country, and then having people shout and spit and yell at her and everything while she's trying to get into the abortion clinic, and people are telling her, oh, it's murder and all this stuff, and then have to go through the abortion herself and then come back out and then just try and live a life again afterwards. It's like, it's fucking horrific.
I mean, why aren't they putting that same energy into protesting outside of like gun shops? And
Exactly. And then that's the thing when they say, like, when people say that you don't care about the babies after they're born, yeah, it's proven in Uvalde, the recent shooting.
And it's just, I mean, how many children are going to school hungry every day or go to bed hungry? Like schools have these programs where they're feeding kids because their parents can't afford to feed them. And then there are some schools who even like give less of a shit because if they won't let the kids continue to eat in school, if they owe like $3 or $4 for their lunch program, like they just don't, just don't care. They just don't care. And like, so I think we talked earlier, but the abortion rate is 37 per 100,000 people in countries that prohibit abortion altogether or only allow it in instances when it saves a woman's life.
Sorry, is that 100,000 or 1,000?
1,000, 37 per 1,000 in countries that prohibit abortion, and 34 per 1,000 in countries that broadly allow for abortion. So it's statistically not even relevant to say it's just a matter of eliminating options, eliminating choice, controlling half the population and demonizing them and turning them into vessels, and then not giving it what happens to the babies who are born as a result.
Yeah. And then you can hear, like, in just in that short clip, like a lot of the rhetoric they're using, it's been getting stronger over the last sort of 6 months. And like where he's saying, like, killing young lives, murdering infants and all this stuff, you know, they say those things now. And instead of saying, you know, they're still pro-life, but now we're pro-abortion, pro-murder and all these other things.
But they're still pro-life until they're actually walking, talking, rootin' tootin' kids that are getting slaughtered at school. Yeah, exactly. then fuck them. Their appetite for guns outweigh their appetite for saving babies' lives.
Yeah. And I think I saw like I was watching, and it was like a comedy thing, and they had like, they're selling, I think it was on The Boys, backpacks with bulletproof things in the back of them for your school kids. And I think that's actually a reality now, isn't it?
I think so.
Yeah.
And that's horrifying.
Yeah. The Boys,
like they're not setting up an environment where people actually want to have children. I mean, because if you have children, like, you're sending them off to school not knowing if you're ever going to see them again. Like in the 4th grade, you don't know what's going to happen when that kid leaves. So it's not even like you're making it a safe place for these children to be born into.
Yeah, exactly.
And Amnesty International, they have an abortion policy that calls for the full decriminalization of abortion and provide universal access to abortion, post-abortion care, and evidence-based, non-biased abortion-related information. And So, I mean, Amnesty International is kind of a big deal. And then even they are like, this is a basic human right. Like,
Yeah.
you're stripping human rights,
And
which is just the tip of the iceberg, because now there is also the overturning of Roe v. Wade. Now some people are like, oh, does that mean we can go after same-sex marriages and interracial marriages? Because I've never liked those either. Like, it is
Justice
just,
Thomas.
It's just the beginning. It's just the beginning.
Yeah, it's like in the same week he gets rid of Roe v. Wade, he signs that thing protecting concealed carry as a right. What?
And so the draft, Justice Alito, his leaked opinion on like Roe v. Wade, in it, he quotes Sir Matthew Hale, a 17th century jurist who conceived the notion that husbands can't be prosecuted for raping their wives, who sentenced women to death as witches, and whose misogyny stood out even in his time in the 17th century. And that they quoted him in their opinion to overturn Roe v. Wade. You're quoting a witch hunter who thinks like, no, it's totally fine for marital rape. That's cool.
Well, it's not rape if you agree to the marriage. That means you say yes forever, according to him.
According to him.
So basically, they're saying that it's okay to rape your wife and make her pregnant, and she has to have the baby no matter what. That's essentially what they're saying. And
if she tries to get rid of it, you could probably accuse her of witchcraft and burn her in the backyard.
Yeah. And get your mates to sue her. Because that was they're like turning it into bounty hunting as well. They're like the man, like I can't remember where it was, but like they had this weird thing where a man could rape a woman, and if she got pregnant and had an abortion, his family, because he's not allowed to sue him, but his family are allowed to sue her.
Yes.
For being raped and having an abortion.
Yes, that's also in the US. Of course it is.
Yeah, I just can't remember which state.
I see anti-abortion legislation in 5 states gives rapists and their families the right to sue abortion providers for at least $10,000.
All right.
So yes, and then it's Texas, Idaho, Tennessee, Ohio, and Oklahoma.
Joe, I remember being a kid, right? And America seemed like this shining light in the world that people looked to about democracy and freedom and all of that. And you it might be different for you in Canada, but like you get you realize how wrong that is very quickly.
Well, I think once upon a time it probably was, right? Like the American dream is called the American dream for a reason. But okay, back to the giver. So, in I think it's the 3rd book, the community that they're in is known for taking in people from the other communities. So this community brings everybody in. So anybody comes in and they will take the clothes off their back. They will make you new clothes. They will give you food. They will give you a home. They will take you in and love you. But then the trader comes to town and he starts trading things with people. And at first it was like, oh, I like your bracelet. I'll give you my hat for your bracelet. But then it becomes, I want to marry that woman. So what do I have to do? So then like a birthmark disappears, but the trade for the birthmark is his humanity. So like he becomes surly and mean and selfish as he's becoming better looking. And that happens with everybody. Like there's one woman who's like, I want a fur coat. And then she had a husband who had like a big spine issue. And then she used to be so caring and loving to him. But now that she's got her fur coat and part of her humanity is gone, she's like making fun of him that he's not fast enough. So as they start to get more stuff and accumulate more stuff, they want to close the doors to the community. And they're like, fuck everybody else. It's just us. And that is what's happening. So that's all I'm going to say. The more those first people got the American dream, the more they wanted to hold on to it and not share it with anybody else. So it's like, fuck everybody else. And that's when it started, in my opinion, to go downhill.
And I wonder what it is, what is specific about America that, I mean, again, we're speaking very generally because it's too difficult to talk in a complex way about this.
Yes.
But speaking very generally, like, why are they like it? And other Western countries, even though we have flaws as well, we have different flaws. And I wonder how much like Canada's relationship with the UK now, because they always say things like, oh, well, you know, America's so young, so they're still learning, their culture's still developing and stuff. but Canada doesn't have the same problems.
Maybe it's the political system, right? Like we kind of mirror the same as you do, where they have a very like, two parties and that's it, where maybe it's like, I don't know what it is.
I can't remember which guy said it, but he says that you can tell a lot about society by the way it treats its worst off. So how it treats the homeless, the disabled, the poor. And then that's a reflection of the ethics and morality of the society.
Makes sense. And like, how many studies have there been that shown that when people see homeless people out on the street, they just become background noise and you don't even see them anymore?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But this, I don't know. Like, it's like
I think it's. I've been trying to think about like how have they got to that point so quick? Because a lot of people, I think, would try and blame the Trump era, but it has nothing to do with that.
Trump made it. I think Trump allowed people to say what they'd always been thinking. It gave them the balls to be loud, I think. Because, I mean, they've also started burning books again. Like, it's like when on January 1st, when the rest of the world flipped over to 2022, they flipped over to 1822 because everything that they've done. And, like, they've never, maybe it's because it's predominantly a Christian country and they have not been able to break from those values or those loud voices, or those voices are the ones that are putting money towards politicians.
I think it's going to be a multifaceted thing, and I certainly think that that's one part of it, because the left and the right are both burning books and stuff. They're all doing it, and I think that the extreme left and the extreme right there seem to be, they're kind of cut from the same cloth, just a different political perspective. And I think a big part of it is I think part of it is the way that they're given their news, and they can't trust any of their news sources out there.
Yeah.
Like in the UK, the BBC is a bit biased, but their biases are very apparent when they're talking. It's very easy to see through it. Whereas the way that each of their media sources over there are so radicalized in their perspective, and you've got Fox News on one side, then you've got MSNBC and CNN on the other, and they're both as bad as each other, just from different political angles.
And it's true. And it's the moderates that there is the biggest group, but for somehow it feels like, not that they're the quietest voice, but like in Canada, in our last election, like 48% of people voted. And so, it's the 48% of people who are really strongly opinioned either way. It's that middle group, like that, those moderates need to stop being so apathetic and be like, just get out there and do something. And I know we see it, right? Like it's happening. There's protests all over the US right now, and there's protests probably everywhere with this Roe v. Wade thing. But then it's like, how do we turn that into action? Because just walking down the street doesn't change these hearts and minds of people who are going to do it. Like, how do they get religion out of their politics more effectively? How did they get people to just start using critical thinking skills, right? Like illegalizing abortion doesn't stop abortion. It stops safe abortion. So now you're going to see higher rates of teen runaways, probably suicides, or, just these mysterious deaths because they've had these back alley abortions and now they've gotten ill. You're gonna have women who were don't they have that law in the US where you can kind of like drop off a baby at a fire station or a police station, no questions asked? Like, how many of those are just gonna and then what? Then you already have an overloaded foster care and adoption system. You're going to have even more of that, unless they go back to some of those like shady shit they were doing in the 18 and 1900s, where they were just kind of like stealing babies and selling them off to rich couples. Like, there's no good end to this. And it's just the beginning of being able to strip away more and more rights.
Yeah, because if you look at, see what happens in China when they had their one parent law, one child law. Young girls were just dropped off at orphanages or drowned. Drowning was a common one, drowning female babies.
Yeah, but then now aren't they having a huge problem because there aren't enough?
Yep.
They're not able to sustain a future because...
Yeah, and I think this is what we were talking about something else the other day, and I said, like, the thing is to borrow a term from Heather Hayden, we're all standing on a frozen lake and then we don't know what's underneath there. This is exactly what I mean. Like, if you ban something that was freely available and you're just suddenly banning it without any thought or just basically any compassion at all, and then we're all standing on this lake and we don't know what's going to happen next.
So this book, Poisoner's Handbook, I think I told you about it. So it is Murder and the Birth of Forensic Medicine in the Jazz Age in New York. And it talks about like prohibition. And then in the early days of prohibition, it didn't stop people from drinking. It just started people making like bathtub booze that blinded and killed a ton of fucking people.
Yeah.
So it didn't make any difference. It just killed a whole bunch of people. And then they were like, all right, maybe we should allow it. And like, you know, maybe that will happen here, but how many people need to die?
And then people like Al Capone get loads of money and famous because of crime. And then that's what's going to happen. You're going to have some kind of really fucking horrible sort of crime moguls going around.
Oh, there's going to be a lot of shady shit. And even so in those Texas, Idaho, Tennessee, Ohio, and Oklahoma, not only can the rapist family sue physicians, they can sue anybody else who aids in the abortion. So even an Uber driver who is knowingly transporting a patient to their appointment can be sued.
That is so fucked up. And it is what you say, it's a religious position that they're taking, because they don't know when the baby becomes alive. There's no evidence like when it's definitely not alive and definitely is alive. We just know there's that weird transitionary period.
Yes. And I mean, it's also about how you interpret the Bible too, because there are also other religions that are reading the same book and don't have the same thoughts about abortion. Like it's like confirmation bias, right? Like you believe a certain thing, so you seek that out in the book that you're reading and then interpret it. It's like all the people who are like, oh, the Bible's anti-gay. Well,
it's not.
There's that book that I was telling you about, My Year Living Biblically, where it's like the Bible talks more about paying your taxes than it does anti-homosexuality, and no church pays taxes.
And I think there's one. Yeah, that's a good point actually. I think there's one point in it where it says something that could be conceived as anti-gay, but if you take it in the context of the whole Bible, it probably isn't. And it's like a man cannot lie with another man as if you were a woman. And that is very much open to interpretation.
Like the time that it was written, right? Language is different, language evolves, and like the way that the language has, I mean, but no one has, like everyone gloms onto that. But like, I don't see a lot of these same people quoting the Bible selling off their daughters into sexual slavery. I don't see them stoning adulterers or, accusing people of I don't know what the word would be, like being sinners because they have tattoos. Like,
yeah, because you're talking about Leviticus there. So like with Leviticus, which a lot of people love to hate on, but like it's like because the Bible and the Quran and all that, they're brilliant books if you read them. But like a lot of these people haven't really read it. Like I'll come back to something in a sec. But then it's like, but Leviticus is basically don't be a dick. And it's like, in our current time, Leviticus is basically writing, in our current time, this is how you don't be a dick. But like, time may change, but keep the essence of what I'm saying here.
Yeah, just don't be a dick, generally.
I remember I knew somebody who's converted to become a Baptist, a Christian. And then I was just talking to her about the Bible. And she was like, oh, I haven't read that. And I was like, have you read the Bible at all? And she was like, no. And I was like,
well... It feels like they quote, a lot of Christians quote certain parts of the Bible that suit their needs, or they kind of feel like they maybe have a general sense of it. But the majority of atheists I know became so after reading the Bible.
Yeah. And I think it's a really good book in terms of a piece of philosophy and morality. And you can learn a lot about how to live your life from it. But you can't be dogmatic about it. Because
I mean, if people take it as stories, right? Like, I mean, do we really literally think that Noah built this ark and got 2 of every single?
Well,
right. Like people do believe that as opposed to it being a story about commitment or perseverance, right? Like crossing the Red Sea. Like they're all allegories and fables and stories that could be very effective at teaching lessons if people didn't literally be like, no, he took a rib, made her out of dust, and then here we are today.
And there's a museum in Portsmouth, and it's basically Creationist Museum, And they have pamphlets in there saying about how there was dinosaurs living 6,000 years ago.
Yes, that's a belief.
Yeah.
I think it would even matter if we could definitively say at this number of weeks, at 24 weeks, it is absolutely definitively a person. It wouldn't matter.
No.
Because then all the arguments would now be like, yeah, but it's like a pre-person. Like you're like, it still wouldn't make any difference whatsoever. It all comes down to, if you don't want to play, if you don't want to pay, don't play. That's
Yeah. And I think there's so many different things feeding into this no abortion thing. And I think we've actually covered most of them, which is just like, wanting to control people's lives, wanting to stigmatize women's sex lives, the fact that they think it's a life when it, evidence will suggest that it's not.
And not caring about the outcomes.
Yeah.
Right. And I think the majority of, so like I had a couple of those studies, right, that said that in a 2017 study, legalizing abortion reduced the number who became teen mothers by 34%, teen brides by 20%. In 2021, there was another study that said legalizing abortion reduced maternal mortality rates among Black women by 30 to 40%. Like the biggest impact here is on Black women because they already have the highest maternal rates. We are able to reduce that number by 30 to 40%. And still like, we don't care, because white women are fine. They'll still find a way out. They'll still find a way to be able to get access to it. 4 studies, 96, 2004, 2020, 2021, found that abortion legalization increases women's education, labor force participation, occupational prestige, and earnings. Nobody cares.
No, that's the thing, is like they don't want, because I feel like that for the women that are basically pro-life, I kind of feel that they get annoyed by independent women like yourself with careers and independence.
Yeah, I think that's true, because what the vision they have for their lives is to be a mother. So that's all that's how they define themselves. That's who they are. That's the most important piece of their life. And they can't fathom what it's like to not have that as your most prevalent thought. But then there's no support for mothers afterwards. Like, and maybe it does come down to keeping women and these young parents, hopefully they stay together, but just keeping them not participating in the labor force, right? Like we don't want smart, actively engaged women, because then why wouldn't they reevaluate their like maternity leaves, right? They have most states offer 12 weeks of unpaid parental leave. So for 3 months, you're not getting any income when your expenses are skyrocketing because you have this child now. And that coverage only extends to fewer than 60% of people who are actually available to it. Childcare in the US is so unbelievably expensive, and not everybody will qualify for affordable childcare or childcare assistance. So now you probably can't even afford to go back to work. So you're forced to stay home and just be a vessel. Like they're not changing any other laws to make it easier or better or more accessible. It's still going to be just as hard, if not harder. And like the majority, in all the studies, the majority of women who are having abortions aren't, 20-year-olds who just went out one night, got drunk, and got pregnant. Like they're already families who have more children than they can afford, so they want to not add another mouth to feed. They are people who are going through marital issues or financial uncertainty that don't want to do that. They're people who want to have children, but medically that child is going to kill them if they continue on with it. Like just reducing it down to, you got fucked and now you're fucked is just so unbelievable.
But they also don't take into account either that the mother or father might have something they don't want to pass on to their kid.
Yeah, exactly. Like I know a couple people who don't want to have children because they know that there's a likelihood that they will pass it on, or that, they had shitty parents and they don't want to risk being a shitty parent. So they just don't want to do that. But whatever someone's reason is, it's their reason, right? Like you can't force someone. You can't force, like if someone showed up at my door, they can't force their way into my house and live here, right? Like in the US, they shoot you for stepping onto their lawn fully legally because I don't want you on my property. But if I don't want you in my womb, that's too fucking bad.
This is the thing, it's like they've done such mental gymnastics about like trying to convince themselves that a parasite is a life, that they've forgotten that one of the principal tenets of being a fucking Republican is the government stay out of your house. They stay out of your life. They're just there to make the infrastructure work and to collect taxes and just keep the train rolling. That's all the government's meant to do.
Keep people out of your homes, but you are forced to carry someone in your womb.
Yeah, it's fucking nuts. That's it. And the reason why they want to own guns is to stop the government being tyrants. That's one of the reasons they give.
Here's the numbers that I had. I knew I had numbers somewhere. 97% of people seeking abortions are adults, not teenagers. 49% are already living below the poverty line. 59% already have children. 55% are experiencing a disruptive life event, such as losing a job, breaking up with a partner, or falling behind on rent. So here's another mouth to feed. And if you're in the US, massive medical expenses to get prenatal care and then actually give birth and have postnatal care.
Yeah.
It's shockingly, for what they consider to be the best country in the world and have access to the best doctors and best research, they still have one of the highest maternal mortality rates. It's so scary there. It's so scary. It's so scary.
Gee, well, for a woman, yeah.
Banning abortion will lead to a 21% increase in the number of pregnancy-related deaths.
Yay.
Unsafe abortions are the third leading cause of maternal deaths worldwide and lead to an additional 5 million largely preventable disabilities.
Fuck me.
So now you just got a guy with a coat hanger offering abortions and they think that's going to make things better.
Yeah. Jesus. I don't even know what to say to that now. That's fucked.
I know.
And that's the thing is,
I just can't imagine. I can't imagine.
Well, the thing is, women in Ireland have been fighting for this for decades. And I think it's about 2 years ago, they've finally got the right to have an abortion. And now, 2 years later, America's stopping it. I'm just wondering if some of their motivation of some of the people in support of overturning Roe v. Wade, if it's just because a lot of the progressive politics in America at the moment, it's being portrayed as a big culture war, which I'm adamant doesn't exist. Most people aren't part of it. But they're really pushing it in their media and the pundits and stuff, that there's this big culture war between the progressive left and the right wing. And I'm just wondering if for a lot of them, this is just to get one back at them, at the progressives, just because they say just make the progressive whine and make the liberals cry.
Because if they were to look at abortion laws in other countries, right, like in Canada or other places, they would see the benefit of it. Like the abortion rate in Canada in 2020 was 10.1 abortions per 1,000 women. 10, because we also offer, I grew up going to Catholic schools, but I remember talking about in health sciences class, we talked about birth control and they did the whole condom on the banana thing. We had, right? It's when you give people access to information and you give them access to healthcare, they're not going to just automatically seek to use it. Nobody wants to go through, not even the expense or the trauma of having an abortion, but just no one wants to go through the inconvenience of it, right?
Yeah.
Given the choice of I have access to birth control, or I gotta take a day off work, I gotta go find a ride and then be there for it's just,
and then because the whole system there is just it's so fucking scary, like you said, because if you think you had sex education, I didn't, and I know all the problems that I had learning how to do things because I didn't get sex education. And then in America, they don't want kids to have sex education. They don't want to learn anything about LGBTQ lifestyles, and they don't want to provide abortion. So what? What do you think is going to happen?
They're even, I forget what state it is. And what do you think is going to happen is they're going to have a ton of babies having babies. Yeah. Because they got to fill TV time, right? 16 and pregnant on Teen Moms. Those are hot shows in the US. Creations who are, because it's not going to, I always kind of felt like religion would be one of those things that would just kind of fizzle out.
Fall by the wayside.
Yeah.
I thought, at the very least, I felt it was getting to be something that was personal. That, is something that you and your family have and you have with your community. but it's not something you want to push onto other people or expect to be put into law. You know, I thought in the Western world anyway, we were very secular, but you know, guess I was wrong.
Yeah. Sadly, we both were. Man, thank you, Mom and Dad, for coming to Canada.
Yeah. Oh God, I think
this was a bummer of an episode.
Oh no.
Only because I think we like to keep things light, but this is just one of those topics that you just can't.
Important.
Yeah, you can't ignore it because it affects. I mean, I don't know how much it'll trickle into Canada, but as you're saying, like the UK or
aside from what's actually happened, what also really fucking disgusts me is the way that they're celebrating it. You know, as a big win. Like, I find it fucking vile. Like the way that when Trump won, and there was a lot of upset progressives, and you know, they were crying, and it's all a bit melodramatic. But the way that they laughed at them for losing, and then the way that they ridiculed them, and then you would have thought, like, you know, develop a sense of, I guess, just respect and just a bit more class when you win. And then now they've gone into complete overdrive.
Because it's not about a quiet victory, it's a competition.
Yeah.
Right? Like, they don't care what they win as long as they won. And that's it's sad to say, but like, and if it never hits their home, they'll never know what that's like. But like, I kind of hope it does. Like, I don't mean to be petty or spiteful, but
it's the only way they learn sometimes.
Yeah. Right? It's like when you're a kid and your mom tells you not to touch the oven because it's hot. And you're like,
but then how do you get people who don't care? How do you get them engaged to actually caring? And then also, how do you get people caring about something until it actually affects them? How do you get to them before that?
Because there's a lot of people who don't care, right? There's a lot of men who don't care because they're not the ones who are going to get pregnant or have to deal with the abortion. There's a lot of women like my age who don't care because we're past that point of getting pregnant. So like, it's a very selfish way of looking about it. And it's also all of it is very selfish on both ends. And like the arguments of you could be aborting the next Gandhi or Einstein. It's like, yeah, but
or the next Stalin or Pol Pot.
Could be the next, yeah, exactly. But it's probably just going to be like a mid-level manager at a bank, right? Like, But just like the arguments are so outlandish and they're so dramatic and clickbait, right? Like, you're murdering babies. Like, no, no, it's a cluster of cells. And at the point where we believe it's no longer a cluster of cells, that's when they're no longer allowed to have abortions.
Yeah.
It's a living thing. So is cancer. You wouldn't have a problem. You wouldn't have a problem getting that the fuck out of your system.
The other thing we haven't covered is that sometimes when there's twins in the womb, one of them will absorb the other one. Is that murder?
Yeah, I think when that kid becomes legal, you just slap him with $10,000 fine.
Yeah, exactly. It's just so fucked up. And like you said about their arguments, again, you're right, because it's really childish, unnuanced arguments that don't have the point that they think that they have with them.
No, they're just sensationalized words.
Yeah, and then the funny thing is that they've criticized the progressive left for doing that for years now, and then yet it's okay for them to do it. Like, everything in there. What I've noticed that since Biden became president is that everything they criticized the progressives for doing under Trump, they've done the exact same shit.
Yeah, but they don't see it because they're hypocrites.
Yeah, or they're like, okay, yeah, but it's not us.
Like, it's just easy to be like, that's fine for you, but that's not.
Yeah,
that's not.
Yeah.
And then why don't we have that same attitude about abortion, right? Like, you want to do it, that's fine, but it's not for me. You don't want to.
And a lot of the men that are going to be affected by this, who, you know, would have supported their partner getting an abortion, their lives are going to be affected as well.
Huge. And if neither of them wants a child, it's really, really easy for the not pregnant one to just fuck off.
Exactly.
So
that's what happened to my mum with me. He didn't want kids. And like, I saw him like once a year, but I don't think he gave her any money. And then when I was about 10, when my grandma died, that's the last time I saw him. He was at the funeral, and I just never saw him again. So, and only saw him once a year anyway.
I don't know what people are thinking, that you force people to have children. They're going to have all these, they're going to create all these new little happy families. It's just going to create a lot of miserable single
Mm.
parents.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I couldn't imagine knowing that I've got a kid out there and that I didn't want to be part of its life, so I left it. And then thinking, like, all these years later, like all those men that's going to happen to, they get somebody pregnant when they're 18 or something.
But think about I mean, there's a woman I follow on TikTok who knew she was not wanted, who, like, her mom couldn't, like, I don't know if it was her mom couldn't get an abortion or whatever. She was passed around from family to family. She lived her entire life knowing she wasn't wanted and knowing that her mother regretted having her. Like, I mean, I don't imagine that most parents would do that, but there are going to be some who are just going to neglect that child. And, like, you've got a whole generation of children being raised knowing that they were never wanted. I mean, there are kids today who were wanted who still turn to their parents and be like, why did you even have me? I didn't ask to be born. And now you've got one that not only didn't ask to be born, but you didn't want it either. Like, that's
Now you could be like, write a letter to the government. Thing is, it's like I have understanding of the people who truly feel that abortion is murder, and then the ones who, like, the very small minority of those people that really think that. But you know, of those, then there's going to be some of those that wouldn't want to legislate on it, you know. But, like, I was thinking, because one of my friends from Ireland, and her mum was raped, and that's how she got pregnant, and because of the rules in Ireland, she wasn't able to give birth. And then so you just kind of think, okay, so this person that I know, everything in my life that has involved that person wouldn't have happened if her mum had been allowed to get an abortion. So it's kind of like, so it's like, yeah, I see where you're coming from, but we don't know how souls work or if they're even real and all of that stuff. But it's not enough to make me want to stop abortions.
And it's like, I mean, I respect someone's opinions about it, right? Like, everyone is allowed to feel the way they want to feel about a certain thing, but I don't think their opinions should enforce law. When your opinion about something infringes on somebody else's rights, that's where that has to end, right? Like, what is it? There's that saying, your ability to, like, I'm going to butcher it, but it's kind of like your ability to throw punches, your right to throw punches ends where my nose begins, right? Like, so you don't want to have an abortion, you don't believe in abortion, you think it's wrong, that's fine.
Yeah, that's your life.
You're entitled to do that. Don't get one if you don't want one, but that doesn't work for me.
It's the audacity to think that you can reach inside someone's personal life like that and tell them how to live it.
Yeah.
It's just fucking wrong.
Yeah.
And they're always talking, because, like I say, it's the same people. Like, if you vote Republican and you actually believe in republicanism, then you should be against that level of tyranny. You know, that's what republicanism is meant to be about. That's why they're so pro Second Amendment. It's because you don't want the government to have that power over you and that hold over you.
Yeah, but it's not the government, it's God.
Yeah. Man.
Now I'm depressed.
Yeah.
To anybody who's watching, neither of us are in the United States. Neither of us will likely have to encounter this as an issue, but
we'll have friends who will.
Yeah, and we stand in solidarity with all the women. Anyone who's been reduced to a vessel, we stand in solidarity with you.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it.